some point the Russians will push and push and push, and they'll do something which forces a NATO country to respond by shooting down one of their aircraft. And that will be a very critical and a very dangerous moment. We're living in a very dangerous time is attacking Russian infrastructure, particularly oil infrastructure, and in that they have been very successful, which is why I think the Russians are rattled by this, because oil is one of the few things that they can still get out of the country, partly through legitimate sales, partly through what you might call third-party sales. It's a very positive response from Ukraine. I mean, what the Ukraine's been doing with their new systems, particularly both their drones and their own now indigenous missile systems.
93 drones light up the Moscow sky in a single night. Russian radar screens turn white with noise, and for the first time in months, the capital itself becomes the front line. But this wasn't chaos for chaos's sake. It was a calculated strike with a single purpose: to choke off Russia's long-term fuel lifeline in the Black Sea.
Or other country sales, and they're using that as a means of sustaining their warfare. So when Ukraine disrupts that, it's a major blow to Russia. So the sense is the whole time that we have been tested. Now, we don't know absolutely at the moment who was controlling these drones, which appeared over both Copenhagen and Oslo airport. So this is very serious, and we can link it to the drone incidents over Poland recently, incursions into Romanian airspace, and of course the 3 MiGs which flew over Estonian airspace.
How do unmanned aircraft buzzing low over the rooftops of Moscow connect to a fuel hub hundreds of miles away at Theodosia? Stay with me, and you'll see how the pieces lock together. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now, back to the video.
But it is a reasonable guess that at least one plausible explanation for it is all linked again, and it's part of a wider Russian plan to destabilize and push our defenses. But if you hear your aircraft has been delayed by 12 hours, you get frustrated by that. And I think it's a normal response. We're so used to it. So we live in this very sophisticated, very complicated world and push our ability to respond to such incidents. I think we are all very vulnerable. I mean, we live in a very sophisticated world. And you know when you travel abroad, if you find that you may be halfway across the world.
93 drones launched together. Not scattered probes, not lone UAVs drifting across the border, but a coordinated swarm that turned Moscow's night sky into a battlefield. For the first time in years, the city that built its whole identity on being untouchable had to watch its own defenses fight tooth and claw above the very heart of the capital. This wasn't noise. It was intent. And intent at this scale forces even powerful systems into panic. Moscow carried comfort in its layered shield. Radar stations ringing the outskirts, missile batteries set in belts, and mobile interceptors ready to plug gaps had taught the public that the capital was protected. Those defenses work well against isolated incoming aircraft, slow single drones, or a stray missile. Each radar track can be handled, each target assigned, and each kill scored.
And that's what Russia is able to exploit. It can exploit our sophistication, the complications of our infrastructure and our devices, very simply, whether it be cyber attacks, whether it be flying drones over an airport. It can actually create an atmosphere, and the net effect of that is that if someone decides to disrupt us, it's very easy so to do, and very rapidly it kind of creates an atmosphere where people are thinking, actually things are going really badly wrong.
It's a net built for individual intruders, not storms. To live in Moscow has been to live under that assumption of layered safety. But a single night flipped that logic. Instead of 1 or 2 blips on a screen, operators watched dozens more appear, shift, vanish into clutter, and rise again. Systems designed to prioritize targets groaned under the sheer volume. Radar scopes filled with echo after echo, the clean lines of control now smeared in static. To those watching, the capital's shield no longer looked impenetrable. It looked as if it were blinking, gasping for clarity. And outside, above the skyline of the Kremlin, the people on the ground saw what looked like fireworks, missiles arcing upward in frantic bursts trying to hit small shapes darting across the black. Here's the bigger question. If the true objective lay far south at Theodosia, why send that mass over Moscow? Why burn so much effort hitting a symbolic core instead of striking the fuel hub directly? That question rests at the core of this operation, and the answer lies in tactics as old as nature. Picture a flock of birds chased by a falcon. If one flies alone, it gets tracked, hunted, locked, and hit. But if 93 move as one cloud, turning, breaking, weaving, the predator freezes, overwhelmed by choice. Which one is real? Which direction matters? Ukrainian planners used that same principle. The goal wasn't brute strength against hardened defenses but confusion and overload. Each drone was programmed not just with a path but with offsets, different altitudes, varied speeds, and programmed maneuvers designed to keep them from colliding while still swarming in clusters. Some carried decoy elements giving off electronic signals to appear larger on radar. Others simply hugged terrain, low and quiet, only climbing at the last phase. By diversifying altitude and routing, Ukrainian operators forced Russian defenses to waste interceptors on drones that weren't even armed. It wasn't about perfect hits, it was about splitting attention at scale. The result for defenders was chaos. Missile batteries fired into swarms but found themselves striking gaps in the cloud. Those that scored hits found that more drones simply pushed through behind. Anti-aircraft guns blazed in wide arcs across the night, sharp flashes visible for miles, but the sheer volume of targets and false echoes meant success was partial at best. It was an image of a fortress lashing out in every direction, burning ammunition at a pace impossible to sustain. And civilians weren't the objective. The swarm carried little physical impact inside Moscow itself. What it carried was disruption. Targeting was focused on diverting Russia's command structures, forcing assets meant for the front to circle back and guard the sky above politicians and headquarters. The strike was a screen, a wall of noise designed to blind sensors in the north and drag defenses inward. While that cloud roared above Moscow, eyes and missiles were pulled away from the south. At Theodosia, the real game opened. With defenses distracted, Ukrainian forces moved against the fuel reserves that fed Russian naval units in the Black Sea. A swarm above a distant capital became the prelude to starving warships hundreds of miles away. This was the misdirection: fireworks in one theater, strategic pressure in another. To those in Moscow, it looked like vulnerability. To planners, it was the feint that set conditions for a deeper strike. And that's the key: the chaos across Moscow wasn't the end of the story. It was only the first move in a broader campaign aimed at the beating fuel heart of Russia's naval power. In a war defined by long-distance attrition and stretched supply lines, an opening like that can decide momentum. And that's where this operation pushed the battlefield toward its next stage. The swarm above Moscow wasn't random chaos. It was the opening thrust of a wider campaign designed to starve Russia's naval heart in the Black Sea. By flooding the capital's skies, Ukraine forced defenses inward and left fuel lines exposed. What you saw was not about damage inside Moscow but about bending the flow of logistics hundreds of miles away. That's the real battlefield: supply, fuel, and sustainment. Warfare now stretches beyond trenches to the junctions that feed the fight. Subscribe and join a community that seeks to understand the realities of modern conflict.